talk about prejudice and the definition of racism. So, anybody can be prejudiced, meaning that you entertain a irrational generalization or rigid generalization about an entire group of people. So that's what prejudice means. A rigid and irrational generalization about an entire group of people. So it's a stereotype to some degree. So it can be both positive and negative. So what is a positive stereotype? When you say things like, well, all Chinese people are good at math. Well, what if you're Chinese and you suck at math? And someone says, well, I thought all your people were good at math. You see how ridiculous that sounds? Like they were born with a calculator for a brain. It's ridiculous. Or you say something like, well, all black people sure can sing and dance. Well, I got news for you. This black person can't do either. Let's look at what racism is. Now, if you look in your textbook, it says, believing that one group is innately superior or inferior to another. Unfortunately, Mashonas does not do justice to what racism is. He fails to include racism being a system of institutional privilege and power that one group holds over another. So, this is what racism is. Now, this is the sociological definition. It refers to a host of practices, beliefs, social relations, the way we interact, and phenomena that work to reproduce a racial hierarchy. Remember, a hierarchy is an organizational structure in which there's a high level and a low level, and in between is inequality. And social structure that yields superiority and privilege for some and discrimination and oppression for others. So racism is a system, and it was a system that was used to justify almost every type of brutality against another group. Racism was used to justify the disenfranchisement, the almost genocidal slaughter of Native American people in this country. It was used to justify slavery. So it is a system of institutional power and privilege that creates benefits for one group at the expense of others. So that is what racism is. Now, let's talk about discrimination. Discrimination is when you begin to treat people unequally. So prejudice is an attitude. Discrimination is behavior. So discrimination is when you treat various categories of people unequally. And it can be subtle, meaning that you don't quite know what that is. It feels like you're being treated differently, but you can't really know for certain. Versus blatant discrimination. And then there is colorblind racism. Now, what is that? Sometimes people feel the need to say, well, I don't see color. I just see people. Well, come on. Now, this shirt is like a mint green. And if you notice that, you see color. It's not seeing color that's the issue. It's what you think about a group when you see that they belong to a particular race. That's the issue. So being post-racial or colorblind does no favor to disenfranchised or oppressed minority groups. So if you were to presuppose that most white people were not racist, okay, let's say that's true. What difference does it make? How does that benefit people of color who are facing racism and discrimination every day in this country? How does that help them, the fact that the majority of white people are not racist? Because there's one truth I do know, that those mostly non-racist white folk are not going to come together and do anything about the ones that are. So you got to be more than just not racist. You have to be anti-racist. And what is anti-racist? Well, to be an anti-racist means that you use your privilege to dismantle the system of racism that was set up in the first place to give you privilege. So here's colorblind racism. Believing that racism is no longer problematic, equal opportunity is widespread, and the acknowledgement of racial inequality, just the very acknowledgement of racial inequality in and of itself is racism. Some months ago, an African-American reporter named Yamiche Alcindor asked Donald Trump a question about a quote that he actually said. This was something he had actually said, and she was reading back his words. And he told her, That's a nasty question, and you're racist. First of all, she can't be racist because she's black and therefore disadvantaged. So she doesn't have any institutional power, so she can't be racist. But she could be a bigot because anybody can be a bigot. But that wasn't the point. To call her a racist is part of what's called colorblind racism. If someone of color points out racism, then that makes them racist? Well, the last time I looked in the dictionary, racism did not mean calling people out on their stuff. Pointing out systemic inequality in our society does not make you racist. That is not, I'm sorry, nice try, but we got you. That's not what racism is. So colorblind racism is pretending that racism no longer exists and we should just move forward. Colorblind racism is an issue. And the reason why it's an issue is because to say, I don't see racism, or I don't see race, I don't see color, is a problem. Because when you don't see color, you don't see, when people are being mistreated because of their color. If you don't see race, you don't see racism either. And you might be one of those people, when someone is really being a victim of inequality, you might say, well, how do you know it's that? How do you know it's not that? Which doesn't make that person experiencing that type of inequality feel any better about what they're going through. It's one thing to go through something that's very uncomfortable, something that makes you feel less than human. But to have people look at you and say, you're making it up or it's all in your head is just as egregious. So, yeah, we need to see color. And most importantly, we need to see racism and confront it when it occurs.